On the day I went into labor, my husband kicked me in my pregnant belly while his mother yanked my hair back so hard I screamed. And neither of them knew that the will sitting in my brother's safe would erase them from every future they thought they owned. My name is Camille Reyes, and I married into the Reyes family believing I had found love. For the first year, my mother-in-law Diane tolerated me the way you tolerate weather, something inconvenient but temporary. Marcus still opened doors, still called her every Sunday, still made it feel like I belonged. What I didn't know then was that the Reyes name came with more than a country club membership. Diane's late husband had left behind a family trust worth several $1,000,000, one meant to pass down through grandchildren, and Diane controlled it as trustee until her death. The moment I became pregnant, I stopped being an inconvenience and became a threat. A grandchild meant a legal claim. A legal claim meant Diane's grip on that money had an expiration date. She started small. Comments about how some people marry into money they didn't earn. Then she began quietly meeting with the family lawyer alone, something Marcus brushed off as just mom being mom. I didn't understand what I was watching until much later. Diane wasn't just cold. She was building a case that I didn't belong, so that when the time came, cutting my child out wouldn't look strange to anyone watching. Marcus, meanwhile, had his own secret sitting 3 feet away from me most nights, a woman named Vanessa, a colleague he'd been seeing since before I even gave birth. I found the messages by accident 2 weeks before my due date, and when I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He told me I was emotional, that pregnancy made me paranoid, and that I should be grateful he still came home at all. By the time contractions started, I was 9 months pregnant and already grieving a marriage that hadn't technically ended yet. I called out for Marcus from the living room floor, certain that whatever else was broken between us, he would at least get me to a hospital. He didn't. He stood over me and told me I had ruined his life. That the baby was the reason Vanessa wouldn't leave her husband for him yet. That everything wrong in his world traced back to me. And then he drew his leg back and kicked me square in the stomach. Diane didn't scream at him to stop. She grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked my head back, hissing that this was what happened to girls who thought pregnancy made them untouchable, as if I were finally being disciplined. For a crime only she understood, a neighbor's 911 call brought paramedics before either of them could stop me from being taken. Marcus told them I'd fallen. The bruising already blooming across my stomach told a different story. And one paramedic quietly stepped aside to call the police before we even reached the hospital. From the ambulance, shaking, I called my brother Nathaniel, what Marcus and Diane never bothered to learn about my family, because I never volunteered it. Tired of being seen as the girl who married up, was that Nathaniel ran one of the city's most respected estate and corporate law firms. He didn't just know how to fight. He knew exactly where the Reyes family kept its weaknesses on paper. Within 48 hours, hospital photographs of my bruising, the paramedic report noting hair loss and scalp trauma, and the neighbor's sworn statement were filed alongside an emergency protective order. Diane was barred from the hospital. She showed up anyway, and security walked her out screaming while I held my newborn daughter down the hall. Nathaniel had spent years, long before that night, quietly helping Diane's late husband organize his estate, a relationship Diane had forgotten, or never respected enough to notice. Buried in those old files was something Diane believed no longer existed, an amendment her husband had signed years earlier, naming any biological grandchildren as protected beneficiaries, unremovable by any future trustee. Diane had spent 2 years quietly drafting paperwork to have my daughter excluded, certain the only copy of that amendment had been destroyed after her husband's death. She was wrong. Nathaniel still had the original notarized and filed under his own firm's records. He didn't sue her for it immediately. He simply informed the trust's bank administrator that a beneficiary dispute existed, which froze all discretionary trust distributions pending review. Overnight, Diane's monthly income from the trust, the one funding her lifestyle, her charity board seat, her standing in every room she walked into, stopped. Marcus's real estate firm ran on relationships as much as revenue, and those relationships lived in the same social circles Diane had spent decades cultivating. Nathaniel didn't need to leak anything false. He simply made sure the protective order and the criminal complaint, both public record, reached the right two people, the chair of Diane's charity board and Marcus's largest investor, who happened to sit on that same board. Within a week, Diane was quietly asked to step down pending personal matters. Within 2 weeks, Marcus's investor pulled out of a deal he'd been counting on to close by month's end, citing reputational exposure. His partners began returning calls slower. Contracts that once closed over dinner suddenly needed more time. While the trust and the business unraveled in the background, Nathaniel filed for sole custody, using the medical evidence and the criminal complaint as the spine of the case. Marcus's attorney tried to negotiate supervised visitation. Nathaniel didn't blink. He wanted it in front of a judge, on the record, where the Vanessa messages could also be entered as evidence of the instability Marcus's own attorney would later try to blame on me. Marcus called constantly those first weeks, alternating between rage and apology, insisting Diane had just lost her temper, that I needed to drop everything before he lost his business too. I let every call go to voicemail. The criminal case reached trial first. Marcus's attorney argued this was a heated domestic dispute, until the prosecutor reminded the room that the victim had been in active labor when she was kicked in the abdomen. The paramedic's testimony, hair still tangled in Diane's rings when she arrived at the scene, collapsed Diane's story that she had simply intervened. I took the stand and described, without flinching, what it felt like to be kicked while 9 months pregnant, to have my hair torn out while begging for help, and to deliver my daughter that same night with no one from the Reyes family present. Several jurors visibly reacted. Marcus was convicted of felony domestic assault against a pregnant victim, sentenced to 18 months, and hit with a permanent restraining order. Diane received probation and her own restraining order, but the criminal case was almost a footnote next to what happened in probate court 3 weeks later. There, Nathaniel presented the original trust amendment. Diane's attorney argued mishandling, confusion, a mother trying to protect the family's legacy. The judge was unmoved. Diane was formally removed as trustee, replaced by a court-appointed fiduciary, and ordered to personally repay distributions she'd taken in violation of the amendment, money that would now sit, untouched, until my daughter came of age. By the time the custody ruling came down, full custody to me, supervised visitation only for Marcus. Pending his release, the Reyes name that once opened every door in that city could barely get a table at the restaurants that used to fight over their business. I filed for divorce the same week. Marcus was sentenced, walking away with full custody and a settlement that finally reflected what those 3 years had cost me. There is a particular kind of quiet that settles into a house once the fear finally leaves it. I remember the first night I put my daughter to sleep without bracing for headlights in the driveway, without listening for footsteps that were never coming back. I understood, watching her grow, healthy, safe, entirely unaware of the violence that nearly defined her first hours in this world, that the truest justice was never really about the courtroom, or the frozen trust, or the empty boardroom seat Diane once held. It was the quiet, steady life I built afterward, proof that the people who try to break you on your worst day rarely survive to witness who you become on your best one. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because the Revenge Tales brings you a brand new story of betrayal and justice every single week, and you will not want to miss what happens next.